Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich talks with community leaders about issues in the public safety arena. Sponsored by River Ridge Hardware.
Well, good morning, afternoon, depends on what time you're going to be listening to this. We're doing things just a little bit different, as you can see. You have me just getting out of a meeting and getting ready to interview a really important part of our community right now, and that's our grocers. And on the show with me is Jeff Phillips, and we're going to be talking about panic buying and supply chains. And when I talk about panic buying, what I'm talking about is when the COVID incident really started affecting here locally, a lot of people went out and cleaned the stores out of certain items. Quite frankly, a couple items I'm still struggling to try to understand why, and that would be the toilet paper issue. That seemed to be the first thing that people went after. But then the more the panic buying happened, the more you saw different items starting to leave the shelves. And it was sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more information or that came out, and the more people saw certain shelves emptying, the more people went out and bought more. And it just became to the point where we couldn't find certain things that are kind of everyday necessities. So I thought it would be really good to bring in Jeff since he deals with these things all the time, and he he's an important part of our community. And Jeff, could you kind of go over a little bit about the supply chain and what you saw at the start of this, and the concerns that it raised with you immediately?
Sure. So, Sheriff, thanks for having me on this morning or this afternoon, depending upon when you're looking or viewing this. But let me start by just saying, first of all, there is no food shortage. And unfortunately, that issue of panic buying that you talked about just a few minutes ago sort of breeds itself. And so panic buying continues to generate more fear, and that fear ends up being more panic buying. The way that the food supply chain works is that if you think back 3 weeks ago, there was plenty of food on the shelves. Nobody had any issue getting any product whatsoever. And that food chain is based on a demand that's predictable. And so go back way to the beginning of the food chain, which is raw materials. When manufacturers get ready to produce an item, take toilet paper, for example, they have certain raw materials that they put onto their properties, and they use those raw materials to produce the product. And when the demand for product exceeds what their expectations are, and in the case of toilet paper, far exceeded it. In fact, we're still having a struggle getting toilet paper to the shelves. We get occasional loads here and there, but there's nothing on a sustained basis that the manufacturers can produce for us that's going to allow that product to be back on our shelves for another 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks. But the challenge is that when the raw materials are not available to make the product, then there's a delay there. So, and in the case of particular things like soup, cleaning items, pasta, those raw materials have to be ordered from their source. So it might be from a farmer, or it might be from a chemical company, or it might be from a paper plant, mill, for example. So when the panic buying started, we emptied all of the existing stock throughout the country, really. And manufacturers were on a mad scramble to try and reproduce that product to get it to our shelves. So it really starts at the raw materials and works its way through the manufacturer, from the manufacturer to the warehouses, from the warehouses to the grocery stores, and from the grocery stores to our customers. So it's a tough deal to try and recover from when we've wiped out the entire supply chain.
So, basically this was a self-inflicted wound, if you will, to our grocer chain, supply chain. you mentioned it's going to take up to maybe a month for certain items to come back. Um, when this first started playing out, what what did you see, or how did you initially try to respond to it, to maybe try to get ahead of it, or if there was such a thing as trying to get ahead of this one? Also, um, where I I know almost immediately I tried to step in and tried to get people to take a deep breath and
Yeah.
to calm down a little, because we were really uh, causing our own issues. But it wasn't just here locally. This happened nationwide. My daughter is a deputy in Colorado, and she called me one night going, "Dad, it's kind of gone a little crazy. We have people literally getting in fistfights in the stores. We never, thank goodness, got that bad in the Spokane region, but when this first happened, was there was there any chance or any way that you tried to get ahead of this, or was just one of those things that you just braced for and tried to keep up with?"
This was like a freight train at the top of a mountain, just getting over the crest and heading downward. There was really no way to stop it. People, as you mentioned earlier, when panic buying starts, people have a sense of fear, and they see other people, gathering product, and that makes them think about, well, wait a minute, if they're doing that, should I be doing that? And and then that sort of just cascades. I get home, I call my kids, they call their friends. Pretty soon, everybody's at the grocery store trying to collect as much of that product as they possibly can. So what we tried to do at the beginning of this thing was to try and get it on top of it by getting with our warehouse. URM Stores is our local warehouse here. It's owned and operated by a group of independent grocers, and it's located here in Spokane. So it's an easy source for us to get product. And they've done a fantastic job of trying to get on top of getting product back into their warehouses to restock stores. But we went to them first to say, what can we do to get ahead of this? Can you start bringing in full trucks of paper, for example, paper towels, toilet paper, even Kleenex tissues? And of course, they placed orders right away to try and respond to that. And it wasn't just the paper products, it was all the cleaning products. We saw an immediate run on canned goods, so canned vegetables, canned fruits. We had pasta. Soup is always a basic item that people tend to have a few extra cans of in their pantries. There was a huge run on soup, rice, beans, flour, sugar, even pet food, because I think there were people with pets who were a little bit afraid of that there wouldn't be food for their pets. And in many cases, those pets are just as important as kids. And so there was the full gamut in terms of the panic buying situation. So we tried to go to our warehouses first, and of course, as they were placing orders, you mentioned it earlier, it was a national phenomenon, and so everybody was placing orders with those vendors, and they were wiped out practically within a 2-day period. And so we got as many of those trucks rolling as we could to use the products that were available and get those into our stores. But in a very short period of time, it was quite evident that we were going to really wipe out the supply chain and have to be in a position where we had to wait now again for raw materials to produce the products to get them back to the grocery stores. I have a sister that lives in California and a brother that lives in Virginia. So when you talk about it being a national phenomenon, that first night of the panic buying, I called to both of my siblings to say, hey, what are you guys seeing out there? And both of them reported the same thing. They had gone to the grocery store, not even really understanding that there was a crisis on the food supply chain, and finding people just pushing everything they could into their carts and heading to the check stand. And so it was sort of an indicator to me that this was going to be bigger, much bigger than a regional problem. It was going to be a nationwide problem. And again, I just want to emphasize that if everybody can sort of buy for their immediate needs now, we can get the food chain back in shape in a relatively short period of time. We need to allow our manufacturers and producers to the time to get those raw materials, to make their products, and then get them to the warehouses and out to the grocery stores. We are starting to see some recovery in some of those areas. And I think every manufacturer, Ozzie, is sort of doing something a little bit different. I'm going to give you an example. Campbell's soup. I'm not sure how many SKUs, stock keeping units, that's a regular, just facing that item on the shelf, how many they have in total, but they have cut 260 of those items to focus on the main items that people continue to buy regularly. Things like chicken noodle soup, tomato soup, cream of mushroom soup, maybe a few of the chunky varieties, but they're focusing all of their attention on those items and putting all their production efforts around those so they can get some of those products back into the store. Those are comfort foods for people. Once they see those items return, there will be this sense of normalcy returning to the grocery stores. And that's happening throughout. The paper product vendors are in the same boat. Toilet paper manufacturers are reducing the number of products that they produce and focusing on the ones that they sell the most of. And I believe that there's an effort to try and really, in the toilet paper area, to try and get to just producing the 4-pack instead of the big monster rolls, so that there's enough product on the shelf for everyone. And so I think that's wise strategy on their part, and we're going to do everything that we can to get that product to the shelf just as quickly as we can. But patience is the key.
And patience is the key. That's one of the things that I keep driving home with some folks. Was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago and said, I think things are starting to turn around a little in the supply chain. And one person raised their hand and went, I'd have to disagree with you because X, Y, and Z isn't back on the shelf. And I went, okay. That X, Y, and Z, as you mentioned, Jeff, are those comfort items. And I think it's when you don't see those comfort items on the shelf, people are still in the mindset that, well, this is still bad, right? And again, we go back into I better buy more. If we just kind of slow down and, as you've stated very adequately, let things resupply, we would be in a much better place much sooner than we will be, because again, I want to reemphasize to folks that if we don't stop the panic buying, it's just going to take that much longer for the supply chain to catch up. And right now, there are certain sectors of it that, as you stated, are anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks out. So it's an important message. How can we help you in driving that message?
We've put up signs, and I think every grocery store is taking a little bit of a different approach to this, but we put signs up about every 12 feet within our grocery stores that are saying, within every aisle, by the way, that are saying, please consider others. Purchase only for your immediate needs so that we can allow the supply chain to recover. There's enough food for everyone if we allow the food supply chain to recover. And so that's a message that we're trying to get out just in our everyday merchandising and marketing, if you will, within the stores. But I think what we can do is, if people have been to the grocery stores as of late, they're starting to see that the other items that may not be those key 15 or 20 items, but other categories are filling up inside those aisles. We are returning to normal. There is the panic buying is really subsided dramatically. I would say the last week particularly, things are looking more like a normal shopping pattern. Now, we are selling more of the center store, grocery, basic type items, and we're selling actually less of things like bakery and deli because we've had to pull some of those products from the shelf. So, for example, salad bars, soup bars, bulk foods, for example, in our natural living sections, have all been pulled from a safety standpoint. And so those are impacting those commodities that are used to be available that are no longer available. And for example, soup in our soup bars, while it doesn't replace a can of soup, it did fill a need for a consumer back 3 weeks ago, where they didn't buy that can of soup, they bought fresh soup from our delis. So again, I think the message that we can give to everybody is we are in the middle of a recovery. It is happening. We are starting to see things come back. A few weeks ago, we had issues with bread. Our vendors, the Franz Bakery here locally that produces product here in Spokane, they have been awesome getting product back on the shelf. There is no shortage of bread. You go to a grocery store, it's there. Some of the other things, water, for example, that was a particularly odd thing that I thought people sort of grabbed quickly for no particular reason. There's nothing wrong with our water supply. Spokane has awesome water, but people, for whatever reason, thought they needed to stockpile water. That issue is well behind us. We have water on the shelf, no shortages there. Milk was one of those things that was also one of those items that people really gravitated to. You can freeze milk. So I think people actually did that. I think they put it in their freezer. But we have a plentiful supply of milk. Dairy Gold is another of our vendors that is here locally in Spokane. They've done a great job of getting that product back on the shelf. And while there are still some hit and misses in every individual stock keeping unit, if you will, every facing of milk, we still have plenty for people to choose from. So all of those kinds of things have already recovered. Flour and sugar is another category that is slowly making its way back. We have those products on the shelf, not in massive supplies, but we're getting that product into the warehouse. We're on allocation. So it's there, and then it's gone. But we are making recoveries on those kinds of products. So again, no need to fear. There's plenty of food within the system, and that will get back on the grocery shelves within the next few weeks, and we can return to a very reliable food supply chain that has been there for us for as long as we've been around.
I think that's an important thing to stress, Jeff, is there is no food shortage. That's one of the things I kept trying to communicate with people throughout this entire thing. And, I really appreciate you taking my calls and help me strategize on some of those things. Coming in, you actually came in and did a PSA for us on this issue. So, folks, there really isn't a problem with the supply chain. Jeff, at one point, they started, and Facebook, the social media has done a lot of damage in this realm. There was a time about 3 weeks ago when they actually started talking about there's going to be a fuel supply problem in the United States. And I went, how can that be? There's a world glut of oil right now, folks. That one never really took off, but there were people starting to worry about that. I really think that one thing that needs to be stressed is the amount of work that people like you and your staff in the grocery stores have done throughout this entire event. You have done a wonderful job keeping things as well balanced as possible, keeping things going. I know that there had to be a lot of long hours that went into that. How are you and your staff handling that as far as an industry here locally? How are they holding up?
Well, I'll tell you that Rosauers Super One and Huckleberries, those are our banners. And I am absolutely amazed and so grateful to our employees who have been on the front line, putting themselves in a little bit of a risky situation. We've been trying to, the cleaning regimens that have been put in place, the hand washing, all of those kinds of things to try and keep our employees safe have paid off. We've really done a good job of trying to keep our people safe and our consumers as well. But I think people are getting a little bit weary. And so we are actually closing on Easter Sunday this year, the first time we've done that in probably 2 decades. But our employees need a break. And so we want them to have some time with their loved ones at home on a great day like Easter Sunday. And then they'll be back to work on the following Monday at 7 a.m. to start up the process all again. But I would tell you that I am absolutely so grateful to our employees who come to work every day. They know that they serve in an essential industry. They know that the work that they're doing is helping their friends, their family, their neighbors, and they do it with a great integrity. There have been plenty of agitated folks who have come through grocery stores and up through cashier lines, and our people have just been so incredibly patient. And I want to say that on the flip side of that, we've also had people who have come through the check stands and are telling us about some of the things that they're doing within their neighborhoods for people they don't even know, to provide extra meals or perhaps share that toilet paper with the neighbor next door. All of those kinds of things, just reaching out to people to check in on them, to see how they're doing. Those are the kinds of things that are happening within our communities. I think all of us should be so very proud of. But when it comes to our employees, they have been working long hours, hard hours, stressful hours. And so, again, my hat is off to all of our employees, as well as all the other employees who are working in our food industry and in the healthcare industry that are, sort of on those front lines, dealing with, things that have to be done.
One thing that before we run out of time, Jeff, I think it's important to cover because it's another issue that I'm seeing rise on social media. And yes, one of the things I do is I do pay attention to social media because it helps us gauge, what the next issues are and how to deal with those issues. Um, Food safety has become one of the things that are being talked about a lot. People worried about going shopping and bringing the food home and having it contaminated with the COVID virus. There are things that you're doing to help prevent that and to ensure the safety of the food. I think it's really important that you talk about that to squash this next set of concerns before they really get started.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. When this virus first started and the pandemic began and all the panic buying started, we knew right away that we were going to have to do a whole lot more on the cleaning and sanitation areas than we have been doing. I would say that I'm really proud of our company standards around those areas to begin with. We've always taken that very, very seriously, everything from workspaces to bathrooms. Those things are really, really important for us to be clean, sanitary, and safe. But during this particular situation, we've amped that up tremendously. So every one of our check stand areas are being washed down about every hour. Our employees are being relieved from their posts at check stands to go and wash their hands with warm soapy water. One of the best things that you can do to stop the spread of the virus. Where we have had sanitizer available, we're supplementing with that. That, of course, is now in short supply, so that's been a little bit more challenging. But if you think about the cleaning procedures that need to happen at the grocery store, it's not just at the check stand. We do the check stand belts and the pin pads and the check stand areas, but we also do all of the counters where people typically will congregate. So at our service booths, we're wiping down those counters. We are in our production areas, not only in the counters that you see visibly in front of you, but in the back room areas. And at night, we're doing a very deep clean with sanitizer and disinfectant to make sure that all of those areas are as safe as possible for the food that we are producing on site. So we're wiping down the doors of freezer cases in the aisles, all handles, all doorknobs, all fixtures in the bathrooms, the entryway doors, and we actually have people in our lobbies wiping down your shopping cart before you actually put your hands on it. So it's completely sanitized by the time you take charge of that cart and then move forward with it. But we're doing everything we can from a cleaning standpoint and a sanitation and disinfectant standpoint to make things as healthy and safe as possible in the grocery store.
Social distancing is the last topic that we're going to have time to cover, Jeff. I noticed a lot of the stores are going to one-way flow, letting only a certain amount of people in. One of the things I really appreciated that the grocers were doing was opening up the first few hours just for the our elderly population, so they could get in before everybody came in and kind of cleaned things out. Social distancing is the key words right now. Kind of explain what you're doing in that realm and explain why it's important for people to try their best to maintain that social distance when they're in doing their shopping.
Sure. Well, what we are hearing, and I think it's 100% accurate, is that this is a person-to-person transmission. The virus doesn't spread. It's not foodborne. It is spread human to human. And so it's really important to keep a minimum of 6 feet of distance between you and that next person, because as you speak, sometimes little spittle comes out of your mouth, and that's the way it can be ingested into somebody else's lung system, and that's how that is transmitted. So really important to keep that 6-foot distance. That sort of prevents all of that from happening. And so to your point, we tried to take a look at our elderly and at-risk populations, because we want to make sure that they, who are really sort of those who are most in jeopardy, are taken care of. So we started senior and at-risk shopping days Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday mornings. Now, one of the unintended consequences of that was that we had a fair amount of people congregating, getting at the front of the store, waiting for the doors to open so that they could do their shopping. But what we've initiated as of late is social distancing. We are asking people to stay 6 feet apart as they wait in line at the front doors. And so we've got somebody outside sort of managing that process. We're also restricting the number of people in our stores to about 5 per 1,000 square feet of selling space. A typical store is about 50,000 square feet, and 35,000 of that is selling space. And so that means about 175 or so people should be in our stores at any one given time. So we're monitoring that. When things look like they're beginning to get a little bit crowded, we're going to initiate social distancing at the front door and ask people to wait in line. So as people leave the grocery store, more people can go in. But we're trying to meter that, if you will, to make sure that we don't have an overcrowding situation, which causes a lot more challenges around the social distancing. We've put up little stickers on the floor. At the moment, they're just little X's, but we've got some decals that are coming here shortly to replace those. But it sort of gives you a guideline for what does 6 feet look like. So there's little decals on the floor that say, please wait here until it's your turn to be at the cashier counter or your turn at the service counter. And so those will be installed throughout our stores within the next week or so. In the meantime, we've got X's on the floor to help people understand what that means. And I would tell you that I was out in a couple of retailers over the weekend to see how things were going, and people are being very respectful of those social distancing things. I think people are beginning to get it. But if you're one of those that thinks you can just sort of charge your way through, I will tell you that you're going to get some resistance, because people are becoming very attuned to what it means to be 6 feet apart. So I'm asking people as they come into the grocery stores to please be respectful of that. If one of our employees asks you to please keep your social distance from the next person, don't get angry. Take that as a nice gesture to help you be safe, because that's what we're really trying to do. We want people who are shopping in grocery stores and all other retailers to have that same emphasis on social distancing. Once we all get it and practice it, it will be so much easier for all of us. And it's a great way to keep us all safe.
And it is. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, and for all the work that you've been doing. You're an integral part of our community. And folks, if you don't remember who was on with us today, it's Jeff Phillips from the Rosauers grocery chains. And Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I know it's a heavy lift that you're doing out there, and you're very busy. And for everything that you're doing, and all your employees, please let them know that we support them and we thank them.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. We really appreciate all the support that the city, county have been to us in trying to fulfill our missions here. Wishing everybody
and folks,
the best, and reminder just to keep safe.
All right. I hope you have a great Easter, and everybody out there, I hope you have a great Easter also. This is Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich with the Sheriff's Report. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Ask the host a question, recommend a guest, or check out any of our other programs on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SpokaneTalksMedia.com. Sponsored by River Ridge Hardware.